So I'm going to be explaining how to do an introduction for a scientific report. And it's very important that when you're looking through this report that we see on the screen, that we do so in conjunction with the marking criteria or marking rubric for the report. So the first thing we need to do is avoid failing. In order to avoid failing, we need to essentially have everything ticked off in that fail box. Different reports are going to have different amounts. The one in this particular report you're looking at has got 4 key elements that we need to address. So the first statement to avoid a fail reads, does not address the following key elements using evidence-based materials where appropriate. For starters, that word evidence implies that we need to get it from the literature, whether that be from a journal article or a textbook. If you write down your own statements, even if you're addressing the points there, unless they're evidence-based, it won't actually count. So the first thing is we need to provide a background information on the topic. Now we look at this introduction, there's actually a majority of these first 2 paragraphs are background information. So it's talking about things like reaction time is a universal accepted index of preparation time. So it's a bit of a general statement there, backed up by a journal article. We talk about the factors in this next section here that are capable of manipulating or changing this, and all of this is building up some kind of background. Going hand in hand with the background is relevance of the topic. So we see a clear statement for relevance when it says something like, when presented with a stimulus, reaction time may influence array of factors, each capable of manipulating preparation and subsequent acceleration or delay in movement. So it's basically saying that this is relevant because if we understand reaction time and how it's impacted, then it's either going to speed up or slow down. And that's going to be relevant to a lot of different sports or activities in society. Again, this is more general background and more relevance, just building up a bit more of an argument. We'll get to that section in a moment. And we say the third factor is we need to include a lit review table. A lit review table looks something like this. For starters, there's no amount that you need or don't need. Just keep in mind that unless you've got a reasonable amount of literature in this literature review table, it's going to be very difficult to write a discussion. And the literature review table has a couple of main reasons why it's here. The first thing is it essentially will force you to read and understand the literature. Secondly, it helps you to form a discussion. In other words, we're looking for a gap in the literature, like why are we actually doing the experiment that we're doing? What are we trying to find out? Why are we trying to find out? If there was a clear consensus that something happened every time, it probably wouldn't be worth doing an experiment on. We're always looking for some kind of uniqueness, what makes our experiment different from the other ones. Maybe it's the same experiment using different people. Maybe it's the same people using a different kind of protocol, all differences. So when we do this, we just fill in the boxes, author, participant, methods, and findings. Author, obviously important because we're going to need to use them to reference. Participants, this is just going to help you identify whether the people you're using are different to the people in the literature that you've read. Just a general statement about the methods. Was it a throwing task? Was it a computer task? Was it a running task? Do you have to respond to one signal, many signals? It doesn't particularly need to be in great detail, just a general idea of what we're looking at. And an overall findings. These can either be quantitative or qualitative, depending on what's required. It's always nice to put in numbers if you've got them. That'll help you if you're looking at numbers, build your argument a little bit stronger. But it's going to be different depending on the topics that you've picked. So the final component of a pass mark, or in order to get a pass, is that you state the purpose of your report. It's generally in the last line. So in this particular, it says, therefore, the purpose of this investigation was to demonstrate Higgs law in a practical situation. And it goes on to say why. That statement, therefore, the purpose, that's a real key statement, and you need to have that in there to obtain a pass. Different levels, obviously, if you want to get higher marks, but just as a bare minimum, having the purpose of your report. Now, as we move, that's it. That's a great pass. And notice there's 4 items on that pass list, and they're almost all in order, and they tend to usually be that way. So you can use that list as a bit of a structure to help shape what your report might look at. So we move up into the credit pass box. And the way this credit pass box reads is we've basically said that these components are no more important than the other. If you contain them all, you write up on that credit to distinction line. If you don't, then for how many you miss, you're that much less than that distinction line. So if you miss all of them, well, you're back down sitting on 50%. If you get all of them, you're up around that 75% and everything in the middle. First item on this list is consistently meets APA's scientific guide for presentation of tables and figures, including labeling and citing. So the correct procedure for that is, here's the labeling. This is the correct statement here. It says table 1, and then there's a heading for the table. Notice a couple of things here. Notice that the table 1 is tables in capital. Table 1 with the colon is bold, and then the rest of the statement is not bold. Here's your citing method here. It says C table 1. Notice the small s on the C, capital T for table because it's the name of something. We've inserted that at the end of the sentence there with the brackets around it. Full stop on the outside of the brackets. There's a lot of different ways you could do that. You could start a sentence saying table 1 shows blah blah blah, or you can finish the sentence off like that with C table 1. Common mistakes in this area are labeling the table below. So you'd have the table and then the heading would be underneath. That'd be incorrect. Other thing is people missing this citing altogether. So they've got a table that's never referred to in any kind of text. And straight away, that would be not meeting this criteria. Second thing on this list is that it utilizes varied primary scientific text types within the information. Essentially, primary, we're talking about journal articles, and we've got textbooks here. Essentially, we're using varied. The idea is if evidence-based in the past gets you it, you can probably get through into this section having just textbooks. But what we're saying here is we want the primary. We're really looking for journal articles, and the word varied means more than one, right? So depending on how much you've spoken about is how many articles you would have. There's no number on that. It's just that you've used more than one. You can see here there's quite an array of different journal articles used in this section. The third part of this says demonstrates relationships or links between your elements. And these elements are referring back to that original list we had in that failed to pass list. Right, and it's saying links. So we need essentially one paragraph or section to link to the next. And if we read something like this, I'm going to read the last sentence of sort of paragraph number 1 with the first sentence of paragraph number 2. It says, two such influential elements are the number of stimulus response alternatives and the stimulus response compatibility present. The first sentence in the next says the observed relationship between a number of alternatives relevant to the stimulus. It's straight away it's talking about the same topic, but it's going to go on and expand it a little further. So this paragraph here in some way is linked to this paragraph here. In other words, they have to do with each other. The final sentence of one paragraph sort of introduces the new section, and then the first sentence sort of goes on to unpack it further. It's not like you're reading one paragraph and then there's a completely different topic thrown in out of the blue in the next paragraph without some kind of linking or relationship between them. The final section, the final point in this is provides a qualitative description of your research findings, or of research findings, not your research findings. Anything, there's so many ways you can do this, and you can do it. A couple of quick statements here. It says the majority of Higgs-Law investigations support the notion that increases in SR compatibility will improve reaction time to a given situation. Straight away, that's qualitative. It's saying it's increasing. It says the majority of these shows an increase. Now that's easy enough to do. You could go a little or a lot of detail with that. But as you move up into the distinction level, it says provide specific quantitative information that adds to this qualitative description. Number of ways you could look at that. We're looking for a gap essentially in the literature. Sometimes you can do it easily with quantitative. That's why it's good to have numbers. Sometimes you don't. This particular one here doesn't have numbers, but what it does show is a nice gap, because the next sentence reads, however, these findings will not be reported in all situations. Then there's a specific example. In a recent study, Hobara examined the time response of 8 male basketball players to a pen tapping task. So you've got a little bit of quantitative information there with the 8 male basketball players. And where this information has come from is back to that lit review table. So you'll notice, you'll see it in a lit review table. Here's a good example of when it can be used. So that's next level. We've already said with the qualitative that things, might be going up, they might be going down, they might be staying the same. But now I've put in a specific example of a study saying, in this study, this is an example of that. This one here did this. That helps us when we go to the conclusion, or the next part, sorry, the purpose is drawn. So the purpose now, back to the purpose, which we discussed before, is drawn from evidence-based conclusions. So in order to achieve a pass, I already said, I need to have this statement, therefore the purpose is blah, blah, blah. In this example of a purpose, I've got the collective findings demonstrate inconsistency or a variety. I've shown in my introduction that the one rule doesn't always happen. Sometimes it can go up, it can go down, it can go any which direction. I've shown that through my earlier statements. I've shown that through my lit review table. And now I'm saying the collective findings are varied. Therefore, the purpose of this investigation is to do this. I'm showing you why I'm doing this investigation. I'm showing you because there is a gap. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to go because the findings are varied. And finally, to achieve a high distinction in this introduction level, we need to essentially do that same procedure, but talking about a number of themes. And the word themes really has a wide spectrum. It could be talking about an argument. It could be talking about a pro and a con. It could be talking about two different facets of like a con. It's just two different elements. Your whole introduction isn't just around one thing. It's about more than one thing. And most of the examples that we've given you, we've always got some kind of secondary results. We've got a primary results and we've got some kind of secondary results. An example here, we've got the two themes going on in this whole introduction. The first theme is we've got two such influential elements are the number of responses and the alternatives and the compatibility. So we've got the number and we've got the compatibility. There's two distinct themes. And if I read through, the rest of my writing here, I'll notice that sometimes I'm talking about possible choices and sometimes I'm talking about the compatibility. Two separate arguments, there's two separate themes, both backed up with literature, both with specific examples. That's how I get my high distinction in this level.